Hello and welcome to another edition of the RealTime Fantasy Sports Show. So excited to be here. I'm Jeff Paur, senior writer through RealTime Fantasy Sports, and this is Logan Glaser. He's a contributor and writer. Logan, thanks again for joining me on the show. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jeff.
So on today's show, we're going to do a best ball extravaganza. We're going to talk all things best ball. These drafts are more popular than any drafts on our site at this point. So we're going to do a deep dive into it, talk about strategies, go over each position, talk about players we like, players we dislike. We're just going to go all things best ball on this show, right, Logan?
For sure. And best ball is really taking over the industry just within the last couple of years. It allows users to draft 10, 20, hundreds of teams. And um, it's all about the draft in that aspect. You don't have to do that day-to-day management with them throughout the season.
Yeah, if you aren't familiar, best ball is you draft your team, you set it and forget it. You don't have to set your lineup. The system automatically puts the best scores in your lineup each week. So it's super easy. It's a ton of fun. And like you said, it's the fastest growing fantasy game out there in the industry. So we are super excited to talk about all things best ball today. Also, we are excited to do another giveaway today. We're giving away another spot into the Real-Time Fantasy Sports Fantasy Championship. This is for a chance to win $500,000, $500,000. Leagues are drafting live, even slow drafting every day until the contest sells out. And we also give away league prizes too, $1,600 in league prizes in addition to the overall championship as well. This prize is valued at $300. You must be a legal U.S. resident, at least 18 years of age to enter the contest. Also, please play responsibly. For help, call 1-800-GAMBLER. So we did this contest last week as well. I gave a pretty good question. It kind of stumped the listeners out there a little bit, Logan. I have another good one this week as well. I'm going to get into that here in a little bit, though. I'm not going to give you that question just yet. I'm going to do it in a few minutes after we start talking about some things best ball here. Also, if you have any questions, comments, don't hesitate to put them in the chat. Feel free to ask us anything, or if you have any comments about best ball as well, put them in there. We'll read them. We'll talk about them as well. So let's get into this best ball strategy, Logan. First of all, let's just the simple aspect of it. Like, what is the difference for you when you're drafting best ball compared to season long set your lineup leagues?
Yeah, for best ball, I'm looking for high ceiling players that are going to go out there and get 30, 40 points and that have ability to get those high ceiling points. You don't want those safe plays. So it's okay to take risk on players. Some players that we might talk about is like Mike Williams. He goes with the long ball more often. So that's a great player to target in best ball leagues. He might not be the safest play, but it's okay. You're just looking for that high home run ceiling play.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the first thing on my list, taking more risks. I'm going to take more risks in the best ball league. I'm looking for those guys that can go boom any given week. I'm also looking at more rookies. I'm normally not a big rookie guy, but I'm going to take some more chances on rookies. The rosters are deeper, so you can take more chances. And sometimes rookies, especially running back, receiver, there's guys that go off that aren't drafted super high. So I'm going to take more rookies than I normally do as well. But like you said, I'm going to target players that boom, that can go off, post huge numbers any given week. And I'm also taking more risks. So I might take guys that fall in drafts because people are worried about an injury situation. So the deeper format, I'm going to take a chance on a guy that is more off injured, maybe that can, still produce those big numbers. So I'm going to take more risks, take players that can boom any given week, and I'm going to look at more rookies. Logan,
Absolutely, and a lot comes down to roster build for best ball. It's a lot about that strategy. So I'm just going to go over some of our best ball contests and their roster builds with that. So our main best ball championship, it's currently 57% full. So we're looking at about an August 15th is when that's going to sell out. So do not wait on that. It's 25,000 the first place, $20 entry fee, and then we also have a super flex best ball championship that just opened up this week, $15,000 to first place. So with our normal best ball championship, the roster build is one quarterback, two running backs, two wide receivers, one tight end, and two flex spots, a total of 20 roster spots with that.
Yeah, and I think as we get into the positions and we're going to start talking about how we approach each one, it definitely has to do with roster build, in my opinion. So let's get into QB first. So Logan, you're going to do a best ball draft. I've done a ton of them already with the guys I do a weekly show with Colton and the Wolfman on Sirius XM Radio, and we do best ball drafts every week. I've done, I think, 12 or so already, so I've done a lot of them. I've used different strategies. I like some more than others, but let's talk about QB first. So how are you going to approach QB when you're doing a best ball league?
Yeah, for QB, I want one quarterback that's going to have that high ceiling. Someone like Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence. I think both of them have high ceilings. Lamar Jackson is also a great example for a high ceiling quarterback. So I want one of those QBs that are going to have that high ceiling that someone can go out there and put 30, 40 points. Overall, I'm going to be looking at getting 3 total quarterbacks on a normal best ball championship with 20 rounds. So I'm going to be looking for 3 quarterbacks, one with a high ceiling, and then 2 kind of are safer plays. Just in case of that injury, and especially the bye week, you need to have that 1 or 2 backups at that position.
I'm the same way. I'm taking 3 QBs for sure, and I'm probably avoiding the elite guys. So I want that second tier after Mahomes, Allen, Justin Herbert. So I'm going after that second tier. I'm going to let somebody else draft Mahomes. I feel like with the best ball. So again, you have 3 quarterbacks, and there's a chance that any of those guys is going to go off any given week. So I did this as an example. So Patrick Mahomes last year, he averaged 28.37 points per game. Pretty good number. He led all fantasy quarterbacks in scoring. I looked at week 7 for Daniel Jones, Jared Goff, and Kenny Pickett. So these are guys that you could have a legit build with. This is actually a quarterback roster that I had in one of my leagues. So Daniel Jones, week 7, he scored 30.8 points. Jared Goff scored just 7.8. Kenny Pickett, 15.85. Look at that, though. Jones, he scored more than what Mahomes averaged, and he led all quarterbacks in scoring last year. So that's why I'm not taking one of the elite guys, in my opinion, because I feel like there's a good chance if I get the right guys on my roster, one of these 3 guys is going to score an elite level. That's how I'm approaching it. You okay with that strategy?
Absolutely. I'm perfectly fine with that strategy. I still want that one of those high ceiling guys, but I'm perfectly fine waiting on the other 2. So
all right, let's talk about running back. So what's your running back approach?
yeah, so with running back, it definitely differs for me in best ball compared to normal league. I'm not going to be handcuffing running backs in a best ball league. In a normal league, I think I would handcuff a running back just because if someone goes down and needs someone to step up. But when you're going for that overall prize, such as in the best ball championship with 25,000, you have to have the best top team. So handcuffs won't do that. You need to have a variety of different teams on your roster with that, so players that can go out there and get 20, 30 points.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense, Logan. And with me, with the running back position, I'm going early for the most part. And a lot of my drafts, I just feel comfortable uh, trying to get those elite running backs. I think they're tougher to find as opposed to elite receivers. And like you just mentioned, you start only 2 in our best ball championship, correct?
Correct.
It was just 2 receivers.
And then
So
2 flex spots.
yeah, and if you have 7 receivers on your roster, I think there's a good chance 2 of those guys are going to produce big numbers. So I like the fact that I can wait a little bit on receiver, and I'd rather go running back early. I think it's tougher to find those running backs that are going to produce big later, and it's easier to find receivers. So I'm going to target running backs a little earlier in a best ball format than I would a standards league, and that's just how I'm going to go about doing it.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about receiver now, Logan. What about your thoughts on that position?
Yeah, I think this
I
is
kind of
where
hinted
you're
at
gonna have
what
the
I'm
most
going to do.
players on a roster build. So I'm going to be looking for 7 to 8 wide receivers, just because that's going to be your position that you're going to most need, and it's also the deepest in the player pool with the wide receiver position. You're going to be getting starters in the rounds 13 through 15 for a team compared to a running back where you're just looking for backups. So I'm going to be filling my roster with 3 quarterbacks, probably wanting around 5 to 6 running backs, and then for that wide receiver position, looking at 7 to 8 wide receivers to round that out. So it's definitely the top one I want there.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm going to get 7 to 8 receivers on my roster. I might wait a little longer than I would in standard season-long leagues where I have to set my lineup. But I think you can get good secondary options like a Chris Godwin. You can get him later, and he's a guy I think could produce like a number 1. That's one of the reasons I'm kind of waiting in a best ball format. Again, I think it's easier to find a receiver later in your draft that could go off than a running back. So that's why I'm going to go ahead and wait a little longer in a best ball format. I'm hoping those guys, again, it's just 2 spots on your roster. So even if you get 1 week out of a player like a Nico Collins or something, or Tank Dell, another Houston Texans player. You just get 1 week of play out of him. I think it's beneficial.
Yeah,
So
Zay Jones was a great late round pick
exactly.
for Jacksonville, so he definitely provided a lot of value to players in our best ball leagues.
Let's talk about tight end now. To me, I'm doing a little bit like quarterback. How about you?
Yeah, I'm kind of the exact same way. If I can get one of those top players that are kind of falling past their ADP, I'm going to get them someone like Mark Andrews, DJ Hawkinson. If not, then I'm going to go ahead and wait. I think there are some very good options late in the draft. Some guys that we've kind of talked about is Jawan Johnson going late, Irv Smith. So there's definitely some options later. But if you can get one of those kind of higher type players, I want that. If not, then I'm perfectly fine waiting and getting 3 or 4 tight ends at the
Yeah,
bottom.
I'm going to take 3 tight ends like the QB. I would never take 3 tight ends in a normal league. That's a play out every week, but not like quarterback. I'm okay with trying to get Kelsey or something along those lines because it's a little different, in my opinion, than the QB spot because Kelsey, he's going to outscore a lot of those tight ends. It's a little tougher, in my opinion, to replicate that high end scoring you get from a Kelsey or Mark Andrews. But I'm still taking 3 tight ends. I think that's a way to go. And I'm going to do that. So let's get into defense and kicker before we move on and start talking about specific players and do this giveaway. So what about those positions?
Yeah, I
You
think
gonna
this is
take
the
2?
most important position for strategy wise for best ball. Personally, I'm going to be taking 2 defenses and 2 kickers in all of my leagues. I think it's just too crucial not to have a 0 on your team for 1 week when one person's on a bye. And also in that case that they don't perform well, you have a backup option there. And even though it's just a couple of points each week compared to I'd rather have that extra couple of points than having another late round flyer wide receiver to make it 9 instead of 8. I would personally just like that too.
I agree. I'm torn on this. At times I take 1, and at times I take 2. But I really think that taking 2 is a smart way. Like you said, you don't want to get a goose egg, especially if you're in one of these big championships. So I think it's very important that you optimize your points as much as you can. And if you have just one defense or kicker on your roster, you're not optimizing your points because you're getting a goose egg. All right, let's talk about our giveaway. We also have a question in the chat as well. Someone asked, where will Dalvin Cook and Zeke end up? You have any thoughts on that, Logan?
Yeah, personally, I'm kind of thinking Dalvin Cook might end up with the Jets. That's definitely a rumor that's been going around, especially with Brees Hall coming back from his ACL injury. So I think that would be a very good fit for him to go to their contending team this year, hoping to make the playoffs. They're going to ease Brees Hall in, I think, the first couple of weeks, especially coming off that big injury. So Dalvin Cook could immediately play a huge factor into that offense the first couple of weeks. But then once Hall gets going, it's going to be his show there. But they can definitely use Cook there.
So you kind of think with what happened yesterday with Aaron Rodgers too, reworked his contract, freed up a ton of money. I mean, it seems like they're trying to angle to do something. So it makes sense to me that Cook would go to the Jets, especially after seeing that, right?
For sure. And then for Zeke, I think he personally will end up back with the Cowboys. I think there's several different options for him, but the Cowboys just make the most sense to me where he's going to end up. They kind of need that running back 2 role behind Pollard. So
I think that makes the most sense. I was going to say the Cowboys too. You said both teams, so we're thinking on the same page here, Logan. So we think Cook to the Jets, Zeke back to the Cowboys.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely lots of different options where
Yeah.
Cook could go. You got the Patriots, you got the Dolphins. We got another comment for the Chiefs, but there's definitely lots of different options. But I think the Jets make the most sense for Dalvin Cook.
I agree. Let's do this giveaway now. We're giving away an entry to the fantasy championship. It's our biggest contest on our site. $500,000. Leagues drafting every week, all the time. Slow live drafts. Sign up sooner than later. You don't have to draft right away, but it will sell out. So I suggest sign up sooner than later. This prize is valued at $300. You must be a legal U.S. resident, at least 18 years of age to participate. Please play responsibly. Call 1-800-GAMBLER if you have any issues. All right, here's the question. Let's go. Let's see. First person in the chat that gets this wins. So I stumped Logan and our producer as well, Heather. So let's see if you listeners can figure it out. All right. Austin Eckler was first overall in fantasy running back scoring for the season last year, and he was also first overall the last 3 games of the year, averaging 22 fantasy points per game. Who was second in fantasy running back scoring the last 3 games of the season behind Austin Eckler? First answer wins. Again, who was second in fantasy running back scoring the last 3 games of the season behind Austin Eckler? We will keep an eye on the chat, see who comes up with that answer first, and you will win. 2 people said C-Mac. He was third.
Yes, he
So
was third behind by just a half a point to this player.
Yep, it was close, and this player was close to the top as well. All right, Logan, let's get into players. We'll keep an eye on the chat to see if anyone can come up with that answer. We'll get to that again, maybe give some hints as well. All right, we got a winner. Amanda Eric Akers. That's the correct answer. You win the prize, Amanda. Please, if you would, email to contests@bettersportsnetwork.com, contest@bettersportsnetwork.com, and we will hook you up. Good work, Amanda. You got that one. That was a tough question.
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah. My guess was I had McKinnon as one of my unusual guests. He had a great solid 3 weeks, but Akers had a 34-point performance in, I believe, week 16, which kept that up.
Interesting to see what he might do this year. We'll find out. All right, let's talk about players now, Logan. We talked about how we're going to approach the position. So I'm approaching players different as well. There's players I like more. We talked about boomer bust players, guys that might go off more in any given week. So let's talk about players we like. Give me your first like.
Yeah, first like I like is Justin Fields as a best ball target. Again, I kind of touched on him before, but he has one of the highest ceilings in the NFL. He had back-to-back 40-plus point games, fantasy point games last year. He really improved as a rusher, which you absolutely love if you're in a fantasy aspect. In 2021, he had 420 rushing yards. Last year, he had over 1,100 rushing yards. He has such a high ceiling, which I really love for best ball.
So you kind of stole my thunder with my first player, Logan, but it's okay. Mine's Mike Williams. I really like him in a best ball format a lot more than a standard league. He's going to drive you crazy. He's going to disappear some weeks. But last season, he had 3 games with 21 plus fantasy points his first 7 games of the season. He also disappeared some of those games, had under 4 fantasy points 2 of those games. But man, he went off in some of those games. You can get him a little later as well. So I like Mike Williams a lot, more so in a best ball format because I'm not sure when those big weeks are going to be, and he's going to frustrate me, but I'll take him in this format. All right, Logan, give me another one of your likes.
Yeah, next one is Tony Pollard. Again, he has a very high ceiling. Last year, he had a couple games over 30 points. The volume is going to be there for Pollard this year, and that's what's going to I think he's going to be a top 5 running back this year, especially with that volume, high-scoring offense as well. Easily going to be the lead back, and he has that pass catching ability out of the backfield that we saw last year. So if you're in a PPR league, watch out for Pollard this year.
I'm going to give you a deeper dive here, and I'm going to say Hunter Henry. So again, a best ball format, you could probably get him as your number 3 tight end. I think he's going to disappear some weeks, not do much, but they're going to employ those 2 tight end sets a lot. They have Mike Gesicki there this year. I think Henry's going to have some big games. Think of when they had Hernandez and Gronk together. They had some huge seasons. That's what that offense is going to look like. It's going to be Henry and Gesicki lining up wide. Again, I would not take him in standard leagues because I think he's going to disappear a lot, probably more so than not. But I think he's going to go off and have some big games as well. So I like Hunter Henry as one of my likes in best ball. Give me another one for you, Logan.
Yeah, another I like is Rondell Moore. So again, volume this year. DeAndre Hopkins is gone with that offense. He should be the number 2, but I think he can compete for that number 1 role. Before his injury last year, he finished with his last 3 games 23 points, 15, and 19. So he has capability of putting up 20 plus fantasy points, and he's going extremely late in drafts. So Moore is definitely a player that I'm going to be targeting in my best ball.
I have a receiver as well for my next like, and that's the rookie Jackson Smith and the Jigba out of playing for Seattle this year. So he has Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf to compete with for targets. That's scary. But you know what? He's super talented. He's going to have some big games. I think he's going to be a lot tougher to gauge in normal leagues, again, because he has a lot to compete with for targets. But he's going to have some huge games in that offense. 3 really good receivers, though, and that's what scares me. If you're trying to set your lineup each week, he could disappear some weeks because he could lose targets to Lockett and Metcalf. But in a best ball format, you don't have to worry about that because he'll get subbed out if he has a poor week. And so I think Smith and the Jigba has a little more value in a best ball format. How about your last target
Yeah,
player?
last target is gonna be Jameson Williams, so it's different from what I would do in a normal league, so I would not be taking him in a normal league, but with it being best ball, I think it's okay to take zeros with players that are gonna be coming off of suspensions or injuries, with that, so, Detroit's gonna have an explosive offense, and he's gonna be such a steal after those 6 weeks are up that he's gonna be missing, so definitely in best ball leagues, I'm gonna be looking at taking Williams.
Big play ability for sure. So that's you talked about big play guys to target, and Jameson Williams definitely a big play guy. My last like is Raheem Mostert out of Miami. So he has three running backs to compete with: the rookie, a chain, and then Jeff Wilson as well. But right now he's atop the depth chart, so that means he could start some games at least early in the season, and you can get him dirt cheap. He's like running back 50 on our site right now. And while this would drive me crazy trying to figure out when to start him in a standard league, in a best ball league, he's going to have a couple big games and a good offense, and you can get him dirt cheap as well. So I just think he's a player to target and could end up helping you in a best ball format. So I'm all in on Raheem Mostert in a best ball format.
For sure. And then one of the comments that we had was thoughts on stacks this year. So stacks are actually a huge aspect for best ball, especially in the best ball championship where you're going for the overall prize. You need those player stacks with that. So a guy that I'm going to kind of be targeting, and it was kind of mentioned, is Lamar Jackson. But instead of going with Andrews, I'm going to be going with Zay Flowers with that. So I really like that Lamar Jackson, Zay Flowers stack with that. Flowers is going to be going later in drafts. So I definitely like those two as one of my
I love
favorites.
that. That's a great point too. We should have mentioned that stacks are huge in best ball, especially in these fantasy, these big game contests like our best ball championship. So if you get a stack and they have a huge game and you're in the playoffs in week 16 or 17 or in our overall championship, it could be a difference maker. So I love, especially in a best ball like Kelsey Mahomes, if you can do that.
For
You
sure.
sacrifice the running back position a little bit though, but that's huge. AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts as well. Those are really good stacks. But even the deeper ones, like going Pickett Johnson, I think that's smart too, because if they hit in the playoffs, it could really help you. Someone mentioned Pickett and Johnson, so I think that's a good strategy as well. I think going stacks, getting the number one receiver and number one QB is a smart move in best ball for sure. Logan, let's talk about the flip side. So players we kind of want to avoid in best ball for whatever reason. Give me your first one.
Yeah, first one I'm going to be avoiding is DeAndre Swift. So again, with him, I don't think he's going to have the necessary volume to get those huge 20, 25 plus point games. He's going to be splitting the backfield with Penny and Gainwell, and I think it's just going to be tough for him to be scoring 25 or more fantasy points in a given week, which what you're kind of looking for in those best ball leagues with not having that huge volume.
So my dislike, my first one is probably going to be a surprise. It's not that I dislike him. He's actually my favorite quarterback in football. Love watching him play, but it's Patrick Mahomes. Just because I don't want to use a second round pick on him. Like I mentioned before, I think I can replicate his scoring on a weekly basis with three QBs. And so I'm going to use my draft capital on a running back, most likely at the spot that he's going, or an elite receiver. So not that I don't like Patrick Mahomes as a player, I'm just not sure I like him in a best ball format. All right, Logan, give me another one of your dislikes.
Yeah, next one I'm going to go with DJ Moore. I think he's fine in standard leagues, but with best ball, I think it's very high for him to get a huge ceiling as well. Last year, Fields only had 2 games above 200 total passing yards, and again, it's going to be just so hard for Moore to have that huge volume with looking at 25 to 30 fantasy points for him. You're looking there, but I do think he's a good option in standard leagues. But again, with best ball leagues, we'll be avoiding him.
Agreed. My next one's a receiver as well. And that's Odell Beckham. So he signed with the Ravens to take over as their number one receiver. He's getting older though. He moves to a run first offense. I don't think he's going to have a lot of huge games. I want players that are going to have huge games. I think Beckham's going to be pretty ho hum most every week. I'd rather have Andrews if I'm taking anyone from that passing game. I just don't trust Beckham to post big numbers this year, and so I'm avoiding him in best ball formats. I don't think he has that boom factor like some of these other players at the receiver position. All right, give me another dislike for you, Logan.
Yeah, another wide receiver that I don't think has that boom factor is going to be Keenan Allen. I think he's a very safe play for about 10 to 15 fantasy points in a game, but he lacks that huge games, and especially at his age, they brought in Quentin Johnson. So it's a wide receiver room is a little bit more crowded and with Los Angeles. So Allen is a player I'm going to be avoiding.
So I got another player, the tight end, first one we've talked about at that position, and that's Dalton Schultz. So I like the move to Houston for him, but I don't like him from a fantasy perspective in best ball. He only topped 20 fantasy points one game all of last season. So I'm not sure he has many big games moving to Houston. So I think he's going to be pretty ho hum most weeks. And you got to get him as a low end number one tight end if you're drafting. So I think that draft capital is too high for a player like Schultz, who I think is just going to post mediocre numbers throughout the season. In the end, his numbers will probably look okay, but overall, from a best ball perspective, I'm not sure he's going to be a huge difference maker for fantasy teams. All right, Logan, your last dislike.
Yeah, last dislike is going to be DeAndre Hopkins. I think he's just going too early in drafts for me to take a risk on him. He goes an okay spot in Tennessee because he's going to be their number one alongside Traylon Burks. But their offense, I think, is really going to struggle this year. They got Ryan Tannehill. They also drafted Will Levis, but we'll see how that plays out. I think Tannehill's still going to be a starter for at least the majority of the season this year, as Levis is going to kind of be in a learning situation. But it's hard for me to see Hopkins have those massive games that we saw from him a couple of years ago.
I agree with that. Not a great landing spot for him. My last dislike is Aaron Jones of the Green Bay Packers. So he's getting older, but the main thing for him, his numbers were great in the end last year. He was seventh overall in fantasy running back scoring, but he doesn't have a lot of big games, just 4 games with 20 plus fantasy points. His numbers are always around that 11 to 12 range. Again, best ball, you're looking for big numbers, huge weekly numbers, guys that can go off. And I think Jones is going to be ho hum. I'd rather take a younger back with higher ceiling that can post those big games, even like a J.K. Dobbins and a run first offense in Baltimore. I'd rather have him than Aaron Jones, in my opinion. I just think Jones is going to be too mediocre for my likes in a best ball format. All right, Logan, that was all things best ball. Again, we mentioned it at the top of the show. We have all sorts of drafts, best ball formats here at Real Time Fantasy Sports. We have our championship, best ball championship. That's over 50% sold out at this point, isn't it, Logan?
Yeah, it's 57%. We're on target to sell out around August 15th with that. So definitely do not wait. That's going to be sold out probably almost a month before the season starts.
Yeah, correct. And then we have a super flex one that just opened up as well. That should be a lot of fun, and that should do well also. So get into that one sooner than later. We have different ones on our site as well. You can do dime best ball, just $10 to get in. Go to rtsports.com, click on that money league link. You can see all of them on there. We have one more question before we get out of here, though. Someone said, I find myself always drafting 2 bell cow running backs, a flex running back, and a top 3 tight end because any wide receiver is so deep. Am I losing out? But like I said, in a best ball format, I don't think you are. I'm okay with that. Like I mentioned earlier, I think a receiver is super deep this year. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fine as well. A lot comes down to the roster build of that league that you're entering. Again, if you're entering the best ball championship, I think that's perfectly fine to go with that strategy.
Correct. And again, congratulations to Amanda Eric for winning the fantasy championship giveaway today. She got the question. It was a tough one. And I appreciate you tuning in and watching. And congratulations to you for winning. Hope you do well in the championship. Logan, thanks again for joining me on the Real Time Fantasy Sports Show. Always a lot of fun to do this. I like the interaction as well with our our viewers out there. A lot of fun talking to everybody, getting questions also, and good to interact with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Again, best ball has absolutely taken over the fantasy sports industry. If you've not tried one of those leagues, jump in at RT Sports. Lots of different options that we talked about. You got dimes from $10. You also have Dynasty Best Ball. We haven't really talked about that. That's a whole new aspect as well. So lots of different best ball options out there. So make sure to try to join one of those.
Definitely. All right. Thanks a lot. This has been Jeff Paur with Real Time Fantasy Sports.
And this has been Logan Glaser from Real Time Fantasy Sports.
Have a great day, everyone.